actually, are you able to hear me?
Yes,
Please.
crystal clear.
See if I can get my other stuff online here. When under the Manhattan Project,
Yes.
even engineers, most engineers even have a poor understanding of radiation and nuclear issues. But when under the Manhattan Project, when they originally discovered americium, which is a byproduct of making plutonium, and another one called curium, americium is about 100 times more radioactive than plutonium, and curium is to americium what americium is to plutonium. Also, to make a small nuclear reactor for the space shuttle, they needed something that was more radioactive. When they sent the space shuttle up, the one that blew up over Texas, the object that they were so worried about was the americium reactor. They were worried that it might have survived almost intact. And so it's extremely dense power. But back in the 40s, 50s, they didn't know how to control it well enough to use it for a bomb. So they stuck with just plutonium and uranium. But all the transuranics, there isn't just one uranium. There isn't just one plutonium. There's like 250 flavors of uranium, and even discussions of things like isotopes. We were thinking isotopes, and we learned about isotopes in when we were talking about the more advanced physics in school. We didn't talk about metastates. That's something that they've only started talking about just recently. And there's all of these states and things that the radioactive lump that's in Fukushima is going through, that most of the general public and not even engineers have an understanding of how to control. One of the problems is that there are decay chains. Nuclear waste is like a pinball game. Sometimes it's a 1/18 of a second, sometimes it's thousands or millions of years before a decay sequence happens. But when it does, you don't know if it's going to go to a smaller element or a larger element. It can also be hit by different particles coming from neighboring atoms. And that's why a nuclear reactor is. It's a concentration to increase the probability of having a reaction. So what's happening in Fukushima is they've all of this material that is meant to be kept at a distance from each other. And in a nuclear reactor, you bring just enough together, close enough to cause a reaction, and you have to control it by putting in different materials in between it. We used, I did design a nuclear fuel that used zirconium to separate the different types of, I'm a manufacturing engineer. They needed a way to get it done, a way to make this shape out of a material that when you hit it, doesn't like squeeze, it only moves in square little steps. So we came up with a way to get around that. But back to the issue is, in Fukushima, since it's melted, you no longer have control of keeping the individual pieces of material away from each other. So uranium and plutonium aren't the only two things that fission. And you can pick up a book of about 20,000 pages, all the different ways that the things can participate. Right now, they need to quench it. And it is a corporate problem at the time because the official government stance of Japan is that if you smile and wear long sleeves, the radiation will not harm you. And they say that they're more experts on the United States than the US is because they've had a bomb dropped on them and they've survived. The level of this explosion or this accident is so bad that basically I feel that the only thing they can do is to put bismuth on it. Bismuth is one of the few things that kills a reaction. Doesn't stop the fission, but it's a extremely dense, let's think of it as a shade that gets poured into the glass to make sunglasses. So you want to pour it in and you want to mix it up with the fuel. The problem is that afterwards, we're going to be left with about 1,000, no, that's not right, about 1 million tons of bismuth that's radioactive for 10,000 years. But that's better than having a radioactive ocean. Problem is that in some parts of that bismuth, after exposure to plutonium over time and some other things, some portions of it are going to migrate to lots of nasty chemicals. But we've left ourselves in a situation where we do not have time. We need to buy some time. And as stupid as pouring the bismuth over it is, I really believe that that's the course of action we should be doing, which means that we have to get access to where the lumps are to pour the bismuth on them. Also, we need to have the bismuth ready for the other reactors that haven't failed or failed yet. One of the major problems with the reactor style in Fukushima is that the spent fuel was elevated 50 feet in the air in a pool, and it has to be cooled. Now, this has to be cooled for 300 years. Some of it they can separate out and do what they call dry casking. Dry casking is an accident waiting to happen. I worked only with americium mostly, and our spent americium had to be melted, mixed in with really high temperature melted glass, put into a barrel, and taken to the Marianas trenches and dumped in. That was the disposal method.
They're dumping that shit in the Mariana Trench?
They were. I don't know what they're doing now.
Well, the other advantage to using bismuth is its low toxicity. I mean,
once
in the short term, it's better than dumping lead on it or something.
Bismuth actually does not have a stable isotope. and one of the biggest things that misunderstandings that people have is they see and they quote how big the half-life is of plutonium. And they've really got a mistake there. Plutonium, any radioactive substance, if you look up decay chains and you find out expected periods of existence, you'll see that a lot of half-times are in the micro or nanoseconds. It's really the shorter the half-life, the worse it is. So what you don't want to have happen is something to go from an isotope of curium to an isotope of your americium to an isotope of plutonium to a isotope of neptunium, all right in front of you. Bang, 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 bang. Because every time it goes through a decay state, you're getting a dose of radiation. So if you have something with that is a decay chain of a whole bunch of short events, you have to work for it. Now, a lot of times when people say, I want to put this radioactive material and dispose of it, they don't think of the entire decay chain. Well, let's look at uranium and thorium series. Some of them have instances where they go from radium to radon, or is it radon to radium? I think it's radium to radon, where they go from a solid, which you could store on a desktop and not have a problem, except you need shielding over the desktop, to a gas you can't contain. What about hydrogen? And just water, you could go off water. Water has over 30 varieties. First of all, H2O is a shorthand it is not hydrogen it's not dihydrogen oxide. It's hydrogen hydroxide. You name it by what the radicals are. And one radical is hydrogen, the other is an oxygen, and a hydrogen, which is called a hydroxyl ion. Now, that hydrogen is the name of one isotope of hydrogen. Yeah. The second one is called deuterium. It has two neutrons. If you get deuterium hydroxide, which that would be, and that gets into a DNA strand, it's not going to unfold correctly because it's going to have a different strength of bonds. And likely that is more likely to be a cause of autism than vaccines.
What was that?
That's more likely to be a cause of autism than vaccines.
Ooh.
Yeah.
So
Also, you have other combinations. You put that in combination with diesel dust, and you've got a lot of problems.
So is this any of this information out there on any type of like news channel or anything?
I really hardly ever hear anything about it. You just, it's not in the interest of any news channel to talk about anything that General Electric has dealt with.
Yeah, that's the problem. So I got a quick question for Snork. Snork?
Sure.
By the way, thank you for coming in.
Yeah, thank you.
And then Garden Gnome, thank you also for coming in. This is just epic for me. I just like, wow, I feel like I won the lottery. Because this is very important to me.
Yeah.
So don't laugh, but is there a way, because I know this stuff is sinking. It's sinking, it's getting hotter, it's getting closer, gravity's pulling it down. Last I heard, there is no way that we can remove this stuff. There's no way to remove it.
I wouldn't say that. There's no way that they're willing to use, is how I would phrase it.
Oh.
So what would be your recommendation? Like, how would
My
you
recommendation would be to tunnel under it while we still can. Put a bed of bismuth down there and let it melt into the bismuth, and have zirconium pipes running coolant into it, so that when it mixes in, if you want to see how it mixes in, it's iron or mercury, iron or aluminum. When you mix it or put mercury on it, it sucks right into it. So you're going to want to do the same thing.
And how long would you have to sustain such a system?
We would need to sustain coolant into it for 300 years.
Yeah, exactly.
And we
we have to find solutions that are going to work within the scale of a human lifetime, or they're just not going to.
No. That is wrong. That area, it's off to humans for thousands of years.
So this is more of an international thing. So are there?
It should be treated as an international. The second thing is we have a treaty with a bunch of other countries that stated that if we, basically if we let anyone have any of our uranium or transuranic elements, I can't remember the wording of the treaty at the time, that we were obligated to remove their sovereignty and resolve the issue. And probably because of monetary issues, we haven't done that with Fukushima.
So that's a good leverage point.
Well, I mean, look at the sustainability of some of the other systems we've created. There's been a couple that have lasted more than a lifetime or two, but a 300-year project. I mean, we could consider like the field of academia or something like.
No, we're talking
a project.
A 3,000.
3,000. I apologize. But nonetheless, we're talking about a project that goes beyond anything we've ever done.
Future generations might not have much of a choice but to participate.
Is there a big difference between if we just started it now as opposed to starting it, say, a year from now?
Yeah. I don't know how much you guys want me to get into.
Well, the last time that I looked on news about this, maybe a couple weeks ago or so, the last thing that I read about Fukushima was that they were, doing all this exploratory with cameras and, seeing if they could get anywhere near it, which they can't because it's just too hot. It's burning. I can't even remember the heat, but it's extreme, and everything just disintegrates when you get anywhere near it. So you really can't touch it with any external apparatus. Almost impossible.
It's not so much heat; it's the radiation. Electronics just breaks down like you can't believe. When something gets near a neutron emitter, it might not be the material you expected anymore. Now, when you have electronics that are basically gas-doped silicon, when you have a neutron hit them, and a lot of neutrons hit them, the portions of that piece of silicon, the little rock that's the IC that's in your electronics, is no longer doped the way it was, and you can't guarantee what the behavior of it's going to be. And usually they fry out pretty quickly. I believe it's a matter of minutes now when they're sending in probes. Their alternative is to send in fiber optics, which can't handle more than 700 degrees Celsius. No, it's no problem. Let the kid be involved.
He's crying out in agony because of what he's going to have to deal with.
Sorry, I got off track there.
So I think Tim might be interested in having you maybe come on tomorrow or at least for a while on Friday to talk about it. I think I'll probably make this like a snippet, so
I don't know what I could say in 3 minutes.
Oh, well, no, not 3 minutes. He'll probably give you more time. I mean, because this is something that doesn't go on anywhere, right? And I think part of independent media.
It's extremely informative, and you did a pretty good job of explaining it to laymen like us. I mean,
really incredible.
And again, I'm not a nuclear engineer.
It's great.
No, that's still enough information where we didn't know before. So,
but see, I go from, earlier in my career, I would go from problem to problem, and my specialty was showstoppers. So there was a problem with a reactor somewhere, and they needed a way to prevent a loss of containment when they replaced the reactor vessel. And I developed a new way to make nuclear fuel that didn't cause that reactor risk. I've also made I had the world's largest supply of americium. and I
wouldn't talk about that.
I don't have it anymore. We had an NRC license.
I don't have it anymore. Sure.
We had an
How
NRC
much is
license.
americium worth?
Oh,
That'd be my question.
They basically paid us to take it. But I really can't get into that.
Of course not.
We had an NRC license, so this wasn't illegal. I took a bunch of americium sources that were on gold foil, and it wasn't just regular americium. It was kind of heated up a little bit. And we stacked that in a little tube about the size of a battery. And we made a AA battery that lasts for 250 years. The radiation was contained within the vial, and it was captured, so it wasn't a neutron emitter or anything. And my boss's boss asked me to make it up, and we sent it to this place in Kansas to get welded up. And they're like, but how does this thing make electricity?
So was this based on previous work then, right? I mean, or was it
No, it was
a project that you had started? And
it was an idea that I mentioned because of a problem we were having at our facility, where we were having problems with a pile of our product generating 33,000 volts overnight and knocking our material handlers on their asses. And the factory workers were viewing it as a joke. And whenever they got a new guy, they go, "Oh, go over there and move that pile." They go over and with a fork, little hand jack, stick it into to get ready to move it, and then bang, knocked on their ass. And I had to explain where the electricity was coming from to one of our VPs. And he goes, no. And I said, yeah, you can put this stuff together and make a battery if you wanted. And he goes, no, you got to prove that. So he said, send 50 sources to this place and give them instructions on how to assemble it.
so how much did it cost to assemble it?
Oh, maybe $200.
Whoa.
It's a great world we live in where technology is, I mean, we can't really spread americium like that around, but still, we're like getting deprived of some of the better technologies, I'm sure of it.
If you made a bunch of these batteries, it would pay off, as it's not fission based. Fission is basically sitting on the fence between getting nothing and going boom. That's how I view pressurized water reactors. They're sitting on the fence between boom and bad.
That's how I've always understood it.
And I'm not completely anti-nuclear. See, we haven't done anything to get rid of our nuclear waste yet. And people don't even have a handle of what nuclear waste is. And the reactor I worked with in, ate nuclear waste. It was 10% fresh uranium and 90% waste uranium or plutonium, whatever mix. They call it mix oxide. And so basically it ate radioactive waste.
But you're talking about like spent fuel and stuff, not like, low grade nuclear waste like suits.
Yeah, even depleted uranium. Yeah.
Well, what about like contaminated equipment and whatnot? I mean,
No,
you'll have that problem.
It had to be in the decayed.
Exactly.
The problem with you start adding equipment is you have to be able to characterize what all the different problems are, and you have to separate out and clean the fuel. Just like you have to boil out the tar before you use gasoline. Yeah, you got to clean the fuel. You can't just dump everybody's gloves and coats and whatever. And for every little bit of radioactive material you have all of this secondary exposed stuff to get rid of.
Now, was this known information when nuclear reactors were being built?
Well, again, like I said, the training we got was awful. We soon learned that most of what we were told safety-wise was wrong. And we have this problem of simplifying things and oversimplifying. So like with americium-241, they say it's mostly alpha. Now, when we were given training books, our books were just used books from the military. Now, the military's idea of harmless is it won't prevent the soldier from living to carry out a typical mission, or usually less than 2 years of service.
Yep.
So their idea of safe is slightly skewed from what a civilian's idea of slightly safe is.
Well, it's also skewed by economics, of course.
Yes.
when we're talking about
once a soldier gets out, you want them to die as quick as possible, so you don't have to pay secondary veteran costs.
Well, that and the fact that that the power industry is for profit. So on that end of it, outside of the military, you have these practices that the public would probably consider unsafe.
Yeah. Well, sorry, I got off the train of thought.
That's okay.
But we just do not have enough trains done. And what we did in the past was so skewed. 90% is not 100%. But when most people are talking about alpha radiation, a really good one that I could bring up. Somebody mentioned they wanted to get a Geiger counter for checking their food, and that's where I jumped in.
Oh, yeah, Ariel.
Okay.
Sorry.
Have you ever seen pictures from people in Fukushima that are carrying around, all of them have these nice white Geiger counters in Ziploc bags? And your biggest problem with nuclear, if you're more than 15, 20 miles from the nuclear plant, your biggest problem is what you inhale or digest. Like if you get some dust in your mouth and swallow. So inside the body, alpha is the worst because the chemistry gets all messed up. It quickly goes to being an alpha particle, which quickly becomes helium. But that can mess up anything, your DNA, just anything. So if you get your DNA messed up, you don't know what your next cell is going to be. Think of chicken. Does everybody remember that chicken that looked like a dinosaur that somebody made last year?
No, I never heard of that.
Oh, yeah, I do.
Okay. That was made by switching off one gene.
Wow.
That was done with a method called transfection. That wasn't done with regular splicing that I know of. The same thing could happen with an alpha particle in your body. You don't know what that cell is going to become after it switches, which usually can either kill the cell or make it do something silly.
Or even mutate it.
Yeah. So alpha doesn't go through plastic, but it's a problem inside the body because it changes inside. So if all of these people in Japan you see with the alpha detector or the bags, they're not doing anything. And I saw some people waving a Geiger counter over a shipload of fish. Does absolutely no good. If it's hot, radioactive enough, neutron-wise, you'd know it the second you walked up near it with a Geiger counter. You don't need to wave it over all the individual fishes.
It's ridiculous. It's just, I hear that there's this one kind of public relations stunt after another.
Yeah, that's
similar to that,
I'll view it as theater. But the thing is, there's only one kind of Geiger counter that goes for alpha, and it's got since it doesn't go through plastic or glass, you have to use mica. It's a rock that's radioactive or alpha radiation transparent. So you have to take it out of the bag, and alpha doesn't go through fish scales. It's blocked by the skin. So if you want to know if a fish is safe to eat, you have to cut it open, and you have to stick your alpha detector within 4 centimeters of the tissue to know if it's safe to eat or not. So if anybody was really doing radiation testing of food coming out, it would be incredibly expensive. So I really don't think anybody's doing it.
Ridiculous.
I'm sure they're not doing it properly.
Oh, shit.
Hey, Zork, I got a question.
Mm-hmm.
And again, thank you for coming on. This is like a godsend. Here's the biggest question is, how much would you charge us to go out there and check that place out?
Fukushima?
Yeah, somebody like an unbiased person to go out, which I believe they need to go out there.
I volunteered in 2011. The factory I was working at had just shut down, and I said, I've got expertise in. First of all, I offered my expertise in water purification for them. The factory that I was at to prepare the americium, we needed to make water so pure that it would dissolve glass. So I am really good with water purification. So I said, okay, they need somebody with experience getting radionuclides out of water, out of water in high volumes, and can do it quickly. And back in 1980, when our facility was basically greenlit by Bill Clinton to move to Mexico, I was designing a water purification system that was more stable than the previous one we had. And so I was looking around, had all the parts ready. And they gave us 3 months to get the other plant in Mexico operational if we wanted to get our severance pay.
Wow.
And I put together a water purification facility that would have handled Fukushima in 6 weeks. And when we put this in Texas, was the same time that the Waco thing was going on. And most people don't realize that there was a water emergency going on in Milwaukee at the same time as Waco. And Waco pretty much took everybody's attention. And I pretty much had the national supply of nuclear plant level, what they call Roman Haas resin for DI columns, deionizing. And we had 6 main beds, and we had 42 levels of water purification after that. That's called polishing. And we had it all on skids all the parts came together in Texas, and we were going to move them over the border as soon as basically NAFTA was in place. And the thing happened in Milwaukee. They had thousands of people showing up at the hospitals with bad diarrhea. They knew they had something bad, and all of the water experts, big ones like Echo Water and whatever, were in Texas with me, getting ready to put this mega system together and put it across the border. And we actually got calls. All these guys were suddenly pulled out to the meeting we were in. And they come back and say, we might have to take your system and move it to Milwaukee until they figure out if they can save Milwaukee. Because at that time they were looking at, they had 103 deaths in just a day. And the number of people sick in the hospital, they hadn't identified it as cryptosporidium yet. But they were thinking something's bad in the water, and we've got a water system that can handle it. And they said, it would take a year to get another system like mine in place, because I basically used everything up. and they're like, when they go there. So after Fukushima, President Obama did make a statement where he's asking for anybody with special expertise to call. And I said, I've got experience removing radionuclides from water in high volumes, and said I'm somewhat familiar with Japanese. I wouldn't call myself fluent. I wouldn't even call myself able to walk around. But I did know enough about the culture that I thought I could get over there and assist and move a similar system. And I thought, with modern computers and things, we would probably get one ready in 8 weeks. And my response was, we're not interested in cleaning up anything.
That's the response you got.
The response I got, and they said, we only want to know, can we get it back online? And since my expertise was limited to making the fuel or to purifying water, they weren't interested until somebody in government was able to buy some stock in a water company and be able to produce the low quality stuff that they put over there, which is basically just filling tanks and acting like they're doing it. Every few weeks they were just leaking the tanks anyway, draining them out, letting them go.
The other thing that I heard is they're kind of trying to keep a loop going, a loop of professionals that are just kind of working together to contain the public relations end of this thing. And if you're outside of the loop, they're tending to reject calls for outside help, etc.
Yeah, I never saw them do anything that I thought was viable. I can't believe that we haven't put tracks beside the facility yet to move in some kind of cover.
Well, the big thing, I think, when that first all came out, was there was a lot of repression of reporters. I mean, in Japan, they were basically threatened that if they talked about Fukushima or anything that they really knew about it in detail, that they would have not be able to work in journalism again for 10 years or more. They were threatening, journalists with that punishment.
And they would do that by imprisoning them for 10 years.
I mean, you might, yeah. I mean, it's
still it's a worse crime there than shooting someone. You cannot speak. The doctors are not allowed to attribute anything to radiation.
Wow, yeah. But that's the kind of thing that you're dealing with, and that, I mean, if they're unable to talk about it in their own country, how in the world are we supposed to get really good, clear, accurate information about the status? You can find some news stories here and there, like the one I found about how they can't get anything near it because it just destroys it. But that's about it. You're not going to get a whole lot more other than it's really, really bad. I mean, that's it. You just know it's really very
well,
bad.
imagine the chaos that would erupt if Tokyo was declared uninhabitable.
Right.
Which it should have been.
Yeah. There's very similar stuff going on with Chernobyl and Pripyat. And I was, 10, 11 years old, 9 years old when that happened. And, I mean, they didn't even tell the people that there had been a meltdown. They just said, well, there's been a problem. You're getting on a bus, and we're going to move you out of here for a little while, but don't worry, And so people thought that they could come back, and that's why when you see these pictures from that site and from that town, everything's still there in the houses. It's eerie as it can be.
The helicopters that flew over it turned white as they flew over it.
Right, and a lot of people truly believed that they were going to get to go back.
Yeah.
And they didn't tell the European press or news or government for something like a week, at least 3 days before the news was let out, because that cloud of radiation that came up out of there as it moved across Europe, they didn't tell anyone that was going on. I mean,
it wasn't discovered until the radiation hit either Norway or Sweden.
Yeah, it's horrible, the disinformation or lack thereof, the repression of it.
Yeah, a reactor up there scrammed because they thought they had a radiation leak.
That's right. Yes, yeah, right. I remember that. Wow, I'm so glad you were here and that you came on. This has been...
The worst places that hit the United States were not the West Coast. It was Illinois and Florida, because distribution shifts.
The plume.
Density, in the air, when you swirl, Kool-Aid for
What
those.
what areas in Florida?
Down toward Miami.
Mhm.
Oh shit.
Oh,
Yeah,
shit.
no, we're talking about Fukushima now, right?
Yeah.
It's a plume. Am I correct to say that it's a plume?
But just think of it. The plume expands and contracts.
Okay.
If you've ever mixed anything in water, you just see that clouds form and shift and move. It's
Yeah.
just like that.
Sure. Yeah.
And so the West Coast basically is tall mountain range,
Right.
some stuff way up into the atmosphere
Mhm.
that condenses later and comes down on water droplets.
Right.
And weather was just right in those locations where they concentrated it. Vermont, now different chemicals tended to come off different. Vermont got hit with the heaviest with curium.
Mm.
Now, back to the original, the Manhattan Project.
Mm.
When they discovered these two elements, they had the right to name them, but they classified them, and they wouldn't let them pick a name for these two.
For security reasons.
Well, even after the war, after they said, okay, yes, we do know what elements 241 and curium are. We've made them. We can verify it. And they said americium was just so radioactive compared to plutonium, and they thought, okay, everybody knows that the bomb is plutonium. Plutonium's bad. We don't want anybody to know because we want to use nuclear power and make all kinds of money. We don't want anybody to know about americium. So americium's original name was pandemonium. That was the name they all chose. They said,
A lot more fitting.
this stuff is so bad, we don't want anybody to ever get rid of it. We're just going to call it pandemonium. And then they discovered curium. And they go, oh. This is so much worse than americium. What do we call it? And you know, they struggled with what to call it. They did not want curium known. And curium was originally given the name delirium. And let me put it this way: to make a nuclear bomb out of plutonium back in the 40s, when they did this technology, they would have needed a ball of it, 68 kilograms. Well, actually, it's actually kind of small ball. Plutonium's so dense that's somewhere between a baseball and a golf ball. Well, actually, somewhere between a bowling ball and a golf ball. But if they wanted to make a nuclear bomb out of curium, they had to overcome a problem, because you could make this sandwich-sized foil, you know, like what you'd use to cover a sandwich. If you folded it, the curium would start to fission. It didn't need 68 kilograms. It was just a few grams. So there were, as far as we know, nobody's ever made a curium bomb.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that someone has experimented with curium explosives of some type. Maybe not on a large scale, but I mean, if the technology's been around for that long, I mean, of course they would have tried it by now.
Yeah, I don't know anything about those usages of the transuranics. That's not my area of expertise. But my thought is that we're not there yet.
Do you think that there's still technical problems with doing it?
Yeah, I do.
Lovely. Hey, so I have another question, if you don't mind.
Sure. Maybe we should make this the last one. It's been
Yeah,
quite a
if you
long
don't mind,
time.
because it's getting
Oh,
late.
sorry.
Yeah.
Have a good night, guys.
Oh, have a good night,
Thank
guys.
you for
Have a
coming
good
on.
night,
I
Gartner.
appreciate it. Thank you. This has been very, very advantageous for us and our little show. I think it's epic, in my professional opinion, that a couple of educated in industry came on, especially Zork. And Zork, my last question is, and probably this is the biggest question that everybody wants to know, is what's happening now at Fukushima is that they're saying there's 400,000 gallons of water that's coming out at a microscopic level. In my mind, I'm thinking that it's affecting the ocean's water. That's probably a no-brainer. But is there a way to not reverse it, but is there a way to stop this? And I thought about tunneling underneath. I actually made a diagram several years ago, and I posted it on Facebook. We got to go underneath, let it drop into a bucket, haul it away, send it to the moon. I don't know, whatever. But do you think there is hope to fix the damage? Not the damage that's been done, but to stop the damage, I think, because I think the damage has already been done to our oceans. Do you believe that there's a way to at least stop it? Or
Yeah, like I said, right now, the two materials that they would either need bismuth or gadolinium.
Yeah.
We will not get gadolinium without going to the asteroids and bringing it back. So bismuth is probably our only feasible option.
Okay, and then you said that tunneling underneath, which is a good idea. Will that, to remove it?
Basically, no. We're not going to remove it in this millennia.
Okay.
You got your answer there.
I got my answer there. Okay. All right. So, listen. Thank you for coming on. I've got stuff I got to get up at 5:45 in the morning.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Amazing information there.
I know this has been a freaking epic night. Do you know anything about food? Because we're having a food thing tomorrow.
Scott sees you a minute. We know that.
Yep.
Yeah, I actually, before my wife died, I learned a lot from her. And I would really like to get a chance to talk to Jamarl. And I have some ideas for him that I think would really enhance his understanding of economics.
Well, and therein lies the problem of the tunneling. I mean, a 3,000-year project?
No. Basically, tunnel under.
Economics.
Do your work and get out, and you're not going to be able to go back for 3,000 years.
Oh, I see. I thought you said that there had to be a continuous flow of coolant to the...
For 300.
For 300?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well,
I don't think anybody will object to keep that going once they figure out they need it.
Well, you know how people are.
Well, we have another one that people aren't talking about. They're talking about Fukushima, but they're not talking about TIPP.
Maybe you could come back tomorrow night or the day after.
Let me know if you guys have nightmares.
No, this is fantastic. Step in any time. This is wonderful.
Yeah, I was just the manufacturing engineer in the projects. I didn't.
Okay.
Other than how to make a reactor, I didn't do anything else.
Oh, that's
Let's
still,
wrap it up.
Yeah.
Right. Good night.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Bye,
Eric,
have a
for
good
hosting.
evening. Bye, everybody.
Lots of love.
Thanks again.
All right.
Let's love you guys.
Love
Take care.
everybody. Have a good night. Thanks again.